Hey everybody, Console Collector here. GameCube prices are insane, and that's what I want to talk about in today's video. Most fans of the channel know that I have the complete North American GameCube set, and I've actually gotten the set twice, back in 2017, and then in late 2019, very early 2020. GameCube is my favorite system of all time, and for many years I kept up on the prices of it. But honestly, since I finished the second set, I've been focusing on other things in my collection, and I haven't really been checking prices in the last year or so. And wow, I can't believe the prices of GameCube games now. A friend of mine has decided he wants to get the full GameCube set, and he's been talking to me about it, and I've been looking back at prices, and it's just blowing my mind how some of the games that were so cheap for me when I got the set both times are now just out of control. Before we get started, I just want you guys to take a look at what a full GameCube set looks like. This first set here is the one I got in 2017, and this was my house I was living in at the time. I didn't have a lot of space to store it, so that's why it's all stacked up kind of weird like this. It was a real pain in the butt. I wanted one in the middle of the bottom. I had to pull all the games down, and I hated it. So when I moved into my following house, which you can see here, I had it set up on two nice bookshelves, so easy to pull them off and play a game at any time. My first set I not only had the full complete set, I also had all the console variations, all the controller variations, all the big box variations, and a ton of just other variations. I did sell my first complete GameCube set, including all the games, controllers, variants, big boxes, and consoles in 2019 to a big YouTuber that reached out to me and wanted to buy the collection, and they made an incredible offer I couldn't refuse. Once the first set was sold, I immediately started hunting down my second set, and this time I had an advantage because I knew what was rare, I knew what was expensive, and the fine line between expensive and rare, there's some really rare games that were just mega cheap, only a few bucks, but I couldn't find them. So yeah, I had a really good advantage because I got all the rare stuff first, and then towards the end, I got some of the more expensive stuff and all the filler and all that. For my second set, I strictly just wanted all the games, all 554 games, black label. I didn't want any controller variants. I didn't want any big boxes. I didn't want any other variants. I didn't even want all the console variants. I was happy just getting the games back because at the end of the day, I liked the GameCube games, and that was what was important to me. I set aside a certain budget to get the set back with, and within 8 to 10 months, I believe, I had the full set back and lots of money left over. I'm really lucky though, because I literally finished the set about 3 months before this big 2020 boom happened in gaming, and we're going to take a look at that in this video. Alright, so that's enough on my backstory with GameCube. I just wanted to mention how I got my GameCube sets so you have a bit of a understanding of what I've been through collecting the full GameCube set twice. With all that said, I picked a few games to take a look at today. We're going to look at the prices on price charting and see how much they've grown since I got my first set in 2017 up to current prices today. First game I want to talk about is one of the most ridiculous games that got expensive, and that's Disney Sports Basketball. Like I mentioned, my friend wants to get the full set again, and when I started looking up some of these rare games again, I couldn't believe the price of this one when I saw it. It is nearly $800 US. That is just insane. I've had so many copies of this game over the years, I truly believe it's not that rare. I don't know why the price is so insane. I can think of 10 other games that are far more rare than this, but for some reason, this game gets a ton of attention and it has a really expensive price tag now. When I got this game for my first set, I got on eBay for under 50 bucks. I had to dig through my old purchase history and I found it, but take a look, yeah. Not even 50 bucks for this game. That was a okay price for it back then. It wasn't $100, it wasn't $500. It really was a cheap game. Back then I remember thinking, why am I spending so much on a filler title? Maybe I should just wait and get it locally. I didn't have very much patience at that point in the set collecting as well. I was well over 400 games and I was getting excited. I wanted to finish it off. So I remember not being able to find it locally, so I bought it on eBay. I do have to say, this game is definitely not readily available anywhere. Even back then, you couldn't just walk into a thrift store and find it, or a game store, so I did resort to eBay on it, but again, I felt bad paying that much for a filler title. Even after I had my set in 2017, I'd still pick up cheap GameCube games locally when they'd come up, just because it makes good trade bait. And I remember finding an old rental copy at a thrift store. I got a copy from a local retro video game store for cheap, and then there was even a guy that had one on Facebook Marketplace I picked up back then. It absolutely blows my mind that a kid's filler game is now $800 US when it was so cheap when I got my first set. I've had more copies of Disney Sports Basketball than I've had of Speed Kings or Backyard Sports 2007. Those games are truly rare. In my opinion, Disney Sports Basketball is an uncommon game. But with that said, it's so easy to manipulate the GameCube market, in my opinion, that I feel like that's what happened with Disney Sports Basketball. Got a lot of hype, everyone bought up all the copies, and now it's quote-unquote rare. Even getting this game for the second set was pretty easy. There was none locally that I could find, so I jumped on Amazon and I got it for $100 complete. And at the time, that was what it was going for, and that really hurt me to pay that much. I really wish I kept my extra copies of this game, but honestly, at the time, this was a filler game. I had no idea it would get to $800 US. If you told me back then that this game would get more expensive than Fire Emblem and Cubivore and Gotcha Force, I think you were crazy. But unfortunately, it did happen, and I got rid of all my copies, whether I sold them or traded them in. I got rid of them cheap because, again, it was a filler title. I didn't realize this would happen. So if we look at the price charting chart here, you can see the game started to go up and down a little bit, but by 2020, that's the golden mark here for GameCube, which you'll see a trend in this whole video. In 2020, there was a huge boost in GameCube prices. For pretty much every game I looked at, 2020 was that mark where it shot up. And more specifically, it was more of the spring, early summer of 2020 where it shot up. Because like I mentioned, I finished up my set in very early 2020 and late 2019, and that was right before the GameCube prices blew up. People are always saying, oh, you sold your GameCube set right before the big blow up of prices, or you should have kept it or sold it for more. But again, just like Disney Sports Basketball, I can't predict the future. I had no idea. I think I got a fair price for it, and I was happy with the price. So it is what it is. Well, that's enough about Disney Sports Basketball. I wanted to start with that one just because it's the most extreme and ridiculous example of GameCube prices. Next game I want to talk about is Bust-A-Move 3000. Now this was a cheap filler game as well back when I got my set both times, and I looked at the price, $100? What happened? Looking at price charting here, you can see it was a cheap game for a very long time, and then again, in 2020, it started to creep up, and then it just launched straight to the sky. I don't even know why. This game was never hard to find at all. Who hyped this one up? I'm not sure. Next game I want to talk about is Geist. Now this game deserves to be expensive because it's an awesome game. It's a ton of fun. It's now sitting about $50, which doesn't sound too bad, right? But this was a $5, $10 game for years. I never seen it over $10 ever, and now it's gone up. And sure enough, in spring 2020, you see it climbing up, going from a cheap game right up to expensive. I know when COVID hit in spring of 2020, all gaming prices went up, but I think GameCube seen the biggest change. I know that all gaming was affected in spring 2020 when COVID hit, but I think GameCube had the most drastic change. They went from really cheap games up to really expensive games. Now other consoles like the NES, the 64, and the Super Nintendo, they were still being somewhat sought after by then. I seen those start to peak in like 2016, 2017, and everybody was getting into those. When I was collecting my set both times for the GameCube, nobody cared about GameCube, especially in 2017 with my first set. I remember getting games so cheap, whether it was at a local retro video game store or a pawn shop, a thrift store, there was GameCube games all over the place and I was grabbing them for super cheap. I even remember going to a local retro video game store in 2017 with a few friends and fellow collectors, and they're over there looking at high-end Super Nintendo and NES games. You know, they're trying to get Metal Storm or Pocky and Rocky, Hagani, stuff like that. They're all about the high-end, expensive games. And I'm over in the GameCube section looking at games like Powerpuff Girls, and they're laughing at me, being like, GameCube, like, who wants to collect GameCube? This is where it's at. And I've been fortunate because I collect things I like, and I happen to get lucky where I get what I want before the prices go up, for the most part. Alright, sorry, getting a little off track here. Let's look at some more games. Here's Animaniacs. It's $125 US now. This game has always been rare. I've had trouble finding it, but it was never this price. Again, with this one, you can see how cheap it was, and then in 2020, there goes that price hike. Here's Twilight Princess. This price really surprised me. $130? That's crazy. This is a common game that sold well, and it's always available. I never imagined anyone have to pay over $100 for this game, but here we are. GameCube prices are expensive. You can see for the longest time, Twilight Princess was floating around the $50 mark, and then spring 2020, it shot up. Here's Samurai Jack. This one surprised me when I looked it up, because this was another really low tier kind of cheaper game. I believe I paid $30 for this game when I got it both times. It was readily available and cheap, and now it's $155 US. What happened? You can see for the longest time, this game sat under $50. And then spring 2020, look what happened, it shot up. I swear, people are just hyping these games up because why are so many cheap games fetching crazy prices? This is Spirits and Spells. Now, this game has always been rare. Even the first set I collected, it was tough to find, but it was cheap. I ended up walking into my local retro video game store and getting it for $5 back then. The second time was a little bit tougher. I believe I paid 40 or 50 for it because it wasn't well known like it is now, but it was really hard to find. But now here it's sitting at $160, which is so crazy because it's a kids game, a filler kids game with a really low print one, but how could someone justify paying that much for this game? I don't know. And here you can see a very cheap game for a very long time, and then in 2020 it went up again. This is now one of the more known rare games. Definitely people are aware of it, but again, when I was collecting my sets, nobody knew about that game. Now we have Resident Evil Code Veronica, and this game is sitting at a whopping $170. This game has always been pretty uncommon. I wouldn't say it's rare. It always did fetch a bit of money, but not this kind of money, over $100. Yeah, that just seems wild to me. I just want to quickly say, I would love if they remade this game, because maybe if they did that, the price of this one would drop, because Code Veronica is not available to play very many places. This game was floating around the $50 mark for as long as I can remember, but then again, 2020, look what happened. Here we have Zatch Bell Momato Fury. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the rarest games on the Nintendo GameCube. I struggled finding this game both times I collected the set. It's now sitting at $160, so I have a feeling people are cluing in just how rare it is, because once the cat's out of the bag and people see how rare the game is, that seems to hike the price up. This one's interesting because it had a little bit of a price hike in about 2017, it looks like, but then it dropped back down, and then it shot back up in 2020. Now let's talk about Ribbit King. This is actually one of the few games in the set that is 2 discs. It's a fairly uncommon mini golf game. It's really weird and quirky, and it's kind of fun to be honest, but now I'm looking at this price, it's $190. That is really crazy. I remember when I got this game in the first set, I got it in a big bundle of games off Facebook Marketplace for $30. And at that time, like I said, nobody cared about GameCube. I think I got like 40 or 50 games for $30. I remember the second time when I collected the set though, this game was getting some attention because I think I paid $70 or $80 at my local retro video game store for it with trade. So yeah, it definitely was climbing up in 2019, early 2020. And then of course in 2020, look at that price hike. This is Rally Championship. This is legit one of the rarest games on the GameCube. And back when I got it the first time in 2017, I had trouble finding it. Like, nobody even listed it on eBay because it was such an unknown game. It was one of the last games I actually got, just because it was nowhere. And nobody posts games like this on eBay or Amazon or even on the marketplace for sale, especially at that time, because it's just a junky racing game that nobody cares about. I did end up finding a copy on a Facebook group, and he was selling a bunch of just cheap games. I ended up buying a few cheap filler games from him, and this was included, so I was really happy to get that. The second time I got the set, this was the very first game I went after. At that time, for my second set, it was still really unknown. Nobody knew about it. I found a guy that was selling one for $7 at a game store across the country for me. I messaged him, told him I wanted to buy it, paid for shipping, and I got it. It's funny, because after I got this game sent, the guy messaged me after and realized that he underpriced it because it was slowly climbing in price at that time. And yeah, I got a really good deal because nobody kept up on it. It's such an unknown, unpopular game that why would you check on it and see if the price went up? Flash forward to today, and now a lot of people know how rare this game is, and I think that's why the price is so high on it. This is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. It's sitting at $100 right now, but this one, I understand the price. This is an awesome game that's highly sought after, and people have no other way to play it other than on the GameCube, unless you emulate it. So yeah, I fully understand why this game's expensive, because it's the only way to get it, and lots of people want it. But even for a game like this that's really sought after, it still floated around the $50 mark for a long time, and then it suffered the same fate as many GameCube games, and got the price hike in spring of 2020. Now we're just going to quickly take a look at a few games I selected, just to show the trends and how GameCube pricing went. They all float, under $100, $20 to $50 here and there, and then at the same time, spring 2020, you just see them all shoot up in price. And whether it's a popular game, a common game, even a rare game, everything suffered a price hike in that same time. It's crazy how everything just happened all at once. Like even here at Fire Emblem, you can see it was consistently kind of expensive, or the rare NCAA College Basketball 2K3 consistently expensive. But again, they all just jumped up. Even Cubivore, it was always an expensive game, but it faced a price hike as well. Def Jam's interesting because it was really cheap for a while, and then it shot up as well at the same time. And then you got a really uncommon game like Backyard Sports Baseball 2007, which was always dirt cheap, like under 20 bucks. And then it shot up high, but it has come down on that one. Even Gotcha Force, which was one of the more unknown rare games, but it was always expensive, got a crazy price hike as well. This game, Groove Rider Slot Car Thunder, it was a $10, $15 game for so long, and just look at that price hike. That one really jumped up. It went from under 20 bucks up to over 100, which is just crazy. I did see now it's starting to teeter down a little bit, which is good, because it is a fairly rare game, but it's not worth that kind of money. Evolution Snowboarding is another example of a really cheap, rare game that got some attention, and it just shot right up. Doing the research for this video just shows me how crazy GameCube pricing is today. It doesn't matter what game it is, nothing seems to be safe from the GameCube price hike. It is nice to see some of the hikes come back down a little bit, which is good, but for the most part, they've all stayed really high. Finally, to wrap up the video, I just want to take a look at some of the expensive games on the GameCube that have always been expensive, but now they're just astronomically expensive. Like, look at Pokemon Box. It's always been expensive. It's always been rare. People know how hard it is to get. But $1,600 for a GameCube game, that is just insane. My first Pokemon Box, I remember I paid quite a bit for. I think I paid around $2 to $2.50 for it with the big box. And at the time, that was crazy for me. And then my second time getting it, I paid $3.50 for it Canadian, just for the game, not the big box. I didn't care about getting the big box the second time, and that was a hard pill to swallow. That was the most expensive GameCube game I ever paid for, was my Pokemon Box the second time. Looking at the chart here, you can see it was really cheap for the longest time, and then it shot up to well over $1,000. And honestly, for a game that's that rare and hard to get, I don't think Pokemon Box will probably ever come back down. And then here's Gotcha Force, like I mentioned before. It's now sitting at $642, which is a lot. It's pretty much doubled since I got my second copy in early 2020. Then we have Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, which this one really surprised me because it's a Pokemon game and it sold well, but kind of like other Pokemon games, even though they're crazy good selling, it's worth a ton of money. I remember seeing this game quite often collecting both sets, and I'd see it for $40, $50 all day long, and that was the price for it. Nothing special to me. I'm just kind of shocked that it's $200 now, but I guess Pokemon mixed with the crazy GameCube hike, it makes sense. Pokemon Coliseum suffered the same fate. It was a cheap game, $30, $40 all day long. I passed by it many times at that price, and now it's sitting at $150. These last two games we're going to take a look at really surprised me, because these games were really affordable for many years, and then they suffered a crazy price hike. And that first one is Go-Go Hypergrind. It's sitting at $400 now. Wow, that's a crazy hike. I got my copy, I think, for $30 the first time and $80 for the second time, and I had no problems finding them. They're out there, but for some reason, this is a $400 game now. It is uncommon. I wouldn't say it's super rare. It's not even that great of a game. Like, it's playable. It's kind of a cel-shaded cartoon Tony Hawk ripoff. Like, it's fine and got some funny parts to it, but it's not worth $400. Cubivore has always been one of the most expensive GameCube games, along with Pokemon Box, and it blows my mind that games like Go-Go Hypergrind and Disney Sports Basketball now cost more than Cubivore. Last game we're going to talk about is Chibi Robo. Now, this game was around $50, I believe, when I got my first set. It's always been kind of on the higher end scale of gaming, and then I think I got my second copy for around $80. This is actually a really good game. It just surprises me that this game has more than doubled since I got my copy for my second set. It's now sitting at over $200. This one I can somewhat understand because it is such a good game and it's in demand, and it's the only way to play it on the GameCube other than emulation. So it kind of makes more sense than some of the other games on this list. Alright, so that's just a small sample of the crazy GameCube prices in 2023. I love the GameCube, and I'm really glad I was able to get both my sets before this crazy hike happened, because I don't think I'd collect a full set now. I send mad props to anybody that wants to collect a GameCube set in 2023, because it's going to be difficult and expensive. I've made a few videos in the past about the rare and uncommon games in the GameCube set. Maybe you guys can go check those out. Maybe you can snatch out some of the more rare ones before they get any more expensive. After doing all this research on this video, I think I'm going to go play a couple GameCube games and appreciate what I have, because after seeing all these prices now, I really am fortunate to have the full set in my collection. Alright, that's going to wrap up today's video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'd really appreciate it. You can follow me on social media. The information is on screen now and in the description below. I want to thank everybody for watching. I am the Console Collector, and until the next video, happy gaming.